I'm standing on the boardwalk of a ship that launched all the way back in 2010, and it's aging the way I like to tell myself that I am. Except the ship, well, it's actually pulling it off. That wasn't supposed to happen though. The Allure is over 15 years old, and by cruise industry logic, it should feel dated and outmatched by everything Royal Caribbean has built since. But a few hours in, I kept running into moments that made me realize ships this old don't always behave the way we assume they will. So let's talk about it. If you're ready, I am. Let's go. For a ship with this much to do, the Allure's pricing is honestly very competitive. On most 7-night sailings for two people, interior cabins usually range from $1,300 to $2,500 during peak season. Ocean views typically run $1,500 to $2,700. Balconies range from $1,700 to $3,000, and suites typically start around $5,000 and go up from there. That's less than half of what you'd pay on an Icon class ship for a product that stands up very well. Boarding a ship this big always feels a little surreal because you're stepping into a floating city before your brain has even processed the parking garage you just left. But what surprised me most about embarkation day on the Allure wasn't the crowds or the chaos, it was how not chaotic it felt. Royal Caribbean knows how to move people, and even with more than 6,000 guests boarding the ship, the process was quick and painless. No maze of lines and no confusion. It just moved so efficiently that I barely had time to take in the ship's size before I was already walking up the gangway. And that's where everything shifted. The moment you step on board, you're in the Royal Promenade, and you're reminded that this ship was built for spectacle long before the Icon class existed. The energy hits immediately with music pumping, bartenders shaking cocktails, and people exploring with that unmistakable, "It's my first hour of vacation" grin. You know the one I'm talking about. It felt like stepping into something that was very much alive. And Central Park sealed that feeling. I expected it to look tired compared to newer Oasis class ships, but the live plants, warm lighting, and tucked away restaurants created a calm, intentional space most modern ships struggle to pull off. It's the kind of place that relaxes you without trying. But then came the reality check. For all the energy and polish, there are moments that quietly reveal the ship's age. The darker color palette in the Royal Promenade and on the pool deck reflects Royal Caribbean's early 2010s vibe. The carpets and the stairwells and the corridors show their years, and the finishing touches feel a step behind the brand's current design language. None of that's bad, it just whispers, "I've been around for a while." It's a contrast you only notice on a ship this big. The wow factor hits first, and then the age shows up. And that's where the real tension emerged. Not in how the ship looks, but in how it behaves. Some experiences felt surprisingly modern, while others felt exactly their age. And watching those sides wrestle with each other became a theme throughout all 6 days on board. My cabin for the week was a junior sky suite on deck 6, and although the decor clearly reflects the ship's age, the space itself is designed with a practicality that many newer ships no longer prioritize. The colors and finishes make it obvious that this ship is more than 15 years old, but once you look past the style, the layout is shockingly functional. The room never felt cramped, and there's more storage than I think I'd ever had on a cruise ship before, thanks to its large walk-in closet, and had a balcony big enough to actually enjoy without turning sideways to get around the chairs. This one right here. I had been a bit nervous about being just one deck above the Royal Promenade and right beside the boardwalk because bass thumping through the floor at midnight really isn't my love language. But noise was never an issue. I only ever heard anything during the day, and even then it was faint. Once the sun went down, the cabin felt calm and surprisingly private. Now, I'll say the bathroom setup reminded me that this was an older design with a bath and shower combo with a cheap shower curtain instead of the walk-in showers newer ships use, but the water pressure and temperature were rock solid all week, which matters way more than aesthetics to me. I'll take consistent hot water over a fancy glass door any day. And I gotta say, karma found me early in this cabin. And not the cosmic kind of karma that Pinnacle guests seem determined to attract with how they sometimes treat crew, but karma was my cabin attendant here on board. Now, I don't know how he managed to always be nearby without ever feeling intrusive, but he not only made the room, but me personally feel taken care of in a way that truly stood out. He's the kind of person who remembers your rhythm before you even establish one. So yes, my cabin looked every bit of 15 years old, but it behaved like a space designed by someone who actually thought about how people travel. And that became a recurring theme on this ship. Exploring the allure of the seas feels like walking through a ship that refuses to act its age. The design may come from 2010, but the way the spaces work together feels far more forward thinking than you'd expect from something this old. Central Park was the first place where that really hit me. Even after all these years, it remains one of the most relaxing outdoor spaces at sea. The greenery, gentle lighting, and open pathways create a calm, open atmosphere that few megaships pull off, and as the sun sets, the brass ensemble transforms the whole neighborhood into something warm and elevated. Just two decks below, the boardwalk delivers the opposite energy with the same impact. There's two massive rock climbing walls that frame the aqua theater, a full carousel that turns in the center, and families that drift through casual spots all day. It's easygoing and slightly whimsical, and it still works beautifully 15 years later. Royal Caribbean mastered the neighborhood concept long before anyone else, and those early Oasis class ships still prove it. The pool deck is another example. It stretches across decks 15 and 16 with three full-size pools, more hot tubs than you can count, splashaway bay for kids, and lime and coconut bars spread across both levels. With wide walkways, plenty of shade and seating, and a constant lineup of activities, they give the layout a feel that's ahead of its time. It's bright, lively, and it behaves exactly like a pool deck built for people who want movement and space without being constantly overwhelmed. And I'd be remiss not to mention the sports court at the aft of decks 15 and 16. It's got two flow riders, miniature golf, a zip line that repels you over Central Park, a multi-function sports court, and even a scuba training facility that make it feel like a feature from a brand new megaship. And the solarium is where the ship slows down. It spans two levels with seating and a wraparound bar upstairs, and the lower deck centers around the plunge pool and multiple hot tubs. And it's one of Royal Caribbean's most creative designs and something the Icon class simply doesn't replicate. It spreads people out naturally instead of crowding them around one focal point. And at the front, there's an outdoor seating area with sweeping ocean views and massive infinity hot tubs that flank the solarium on each side that still feel modern today. Walking through the Allure, you notice something unexpected. The ship may show its age and small details, but the places where people actually spend their time behave like they were designed for a long future ahead. These spaces still function well, still feel intentional, and they still deliver the big ship experience that changed the industry when the Oasis class first launched. After spending a few days moving through the Allure's neighborhoods, it became obvious that the ship doesn't follow the typical age curve. The places that matter most still work exactly the way they were meant to. Central Park still relaxes you, the boardwalk still brings people together, and the pool deck still pulls huge crowds while making space for everybody. But this ship wasn't trying to act young, it was reminding me that age alone is not what defines a ship. By the time I made it through a few meals, it was obvious that dining on the Allure of the Seas wasn't going to be a consistent story. Some venues delivered the kind of meals you hope for on a Royal Caribbean ship, and others made it painfully clear that this was an area where the ship still has some work to do. My first dinner of the sailing was at 150 Central Park, and it was a very promising start for the dining experience on board. It had a slow start to service, but once that was behind us, the timing settled in and the food was excellent. It was refined without being fussy and exactly the kind of meal that makes Central Park feel special at night. If every restaurant on board operated at that level, this would be a much different section. But that's not what happened. Dinner on day two was at Chop's Grill, which is the steakhouse, and that was honestly one of the more disappointing meals I've ever had on a cruise ship. When I arrived, there was nobody in front of me, but I waited 5 minutes at the host stand before anybody came to seat me. And even after being seated, it was another 15 minutes before somebody came to take my order. The highlight of Chop's Grill for me are their Wagyu steak offerings, and there were three different ones on the menu, so I was excited. I tried to order both the sirloin and the strip loin since they're smaller steaks, but I was told that all three of the Wagyu offerings were unavailable. I was disappointed, but I ended up just ordering a ribeye instead, along with sauteed mushrooms and french fries. Well, they felt bad for not having the Wagyu options, and they tried to make it up to me by bringing me what they called their iconic steak, which was a bone-in filet. Now, I always order my steaks medium rare, but when it arrived, it was more than well done. I didn't think much of it because I still had my ribeye on the way, and as long as that was medium rare, I would have been happy. So they grabbed the overdone steak and they also grabbed my sides, even though I didn't ask them to grab those, but they said they'd be bringing me fresh ones when the ribeye arrived. So that sounded good. I let them take them. Well, the ribeye arrived a perfect medium rare, but the sides were never to be seen again, and they never came back to ask if I needed anything, so I just didn't get to have them. It was just one of those meals where it seems like nothing could go right. Now, look, those things happen, and it definitely did not wreck my overall cruise experience, but it was worth noting, right? That was not a great meal. On day 3, I had dinner at the Samba Grill, which is the Brazilian steakhouse on board. And I've heard very mixed reviews of this experience, but I love Brazilian steakhouses on land, and so I was really excited to give this a try. Now, if you've never been to a Brazilian steakhouse, basically they've got steak on skewers and they just keep bringing you steak after steak after steak after steak. And it's amazing if you're a steak lover like me. But on the menu, they showed there's only 6 different types of meat they're going to be bringing you. And of those 6, only 3 of them are actually steaks. The others are pork, lamb, and chicken. So I'll be honest, that wasn't the most exciting start, but I was going into it with an open mind and ready for the best. Usually they're bringing you meat so fast you can't even keep up with it all. It's just steak, 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 lamb, steak, steak. And that is not what this was. It was actually a solid 10 minutes between seeing your server who would be bringing you more meat. So it was just a different experience from what you typically have at a Brazilian steakhouse. And they ask you at the start of the meal, how do you prefer your steak? And for me, that's a medium rare. But the reality was the steak just kind of arrived whatever temperature it happened to be. And most of the time, that wasn't medium rare. So it was not a great meal. The food was just not great. Now, I'll say the service there was extremely friendly, totally professional. They were really good people, but the food, it left something to be desired and made me realize that all the people I've seen complain about Summer Grill, that is actually in this case justified. So that's not something I'll do again. And then there was the chef's table. Now, I've done versions of the chef's table on nearly every different cruise line out there, and this one just felt scaled down compared to what others do in almost every single way. There were fewer courses, the wine pairings didn't quite match up with the food, and none of the elements that usually make the evening feel special with things like a galley tour or tableside magicians were there. It was literally a 6-course dinner with wine pairings and somebody introducing each one, and that was it. And it was fine. Now, I still met some truly amazing people, and if any of them happen to be watching, you guys are what made that dinner for me. But the food, in my opinion, definitely left something to be desired, and the wine was just, it didn't quite go with it, in my opinion. But honestly, probably the worst part is on the schedule, it showed that the chef's table was supposed to be a 2-hour dinner. But the reality was, it was very close to 3.5 hours. So I was supposed to go see a show after dinner that evening, and I had 3 hours to get there, but that wasn't enough time. So I missed the show that night, and that was disappointing. But those are the sort of things that just happen on a cruise, and you just kind of roll with it as they do happen. Now, look, I know it sounds like I'm being negative, but the food was not a total loss. The main dining room was actually surprisingly good. The service there was very nice. I was in a suite, so I had a couple lunches and a dinner at Coastal Kitchen, and the service there was excellent and the food was really good. And honestly, the buffet was pretty nice. If you would expect on a cruise ship with more than 6,000 people on board, the buffet is going to be a bit of chaos, but really it wasn't. The food was solid. There was plenty of servers there to help you with anything you might need, and even finding a table wasn't an issue. So I was truly impressed with the buffet. And honestly, there were some other good casual options as well. The doghouse serving hot dogs out on the boardwalk was pretty good. Sorrento's pizza is always reliable. It wasn't, the food wasn't bad, right? Like some of the specialty dining was a bit of a letdown, but overall it was not bad. But I will say by the end of the week, the pattern was clear, right? The dining program on the Allure has bright spots, but it's inconsistent and it makes it a bit hard to predict what kind of meal you're going to get. So some venues still deliver the charm Royal Caribbean is known for, and others are overdue for a refresh. Entertainment on the Allure of the Seas delivered some of the highest highs of the entire sailing. The standout, without question, was Aqua 82, which is the Aqua show on board, and it was absolutely incredible. I'd actually already seen the same show on the Utopia not that long ago, but it was as good the second time as it was the first. I was truly impressed. It's one of those shows that has you on the edge of your seat from the start to the finish with its high diving stunts, music that pulls you in, and choreography that makes you wonder how all of it is even possible on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean. Honestly, Aqua 82 is one of those shows you'd pay hundreds of dollars to see in Vegas and walk away thinking that was money really well spent. And Dazzle's also really surprised me. With two decks of live jazz and views overlooking Central Park, the space has a dramatic feel, and the band was genuinely good with polished, confident musicianship that instantly elevates the night. It's the type of venue you wander into just to look, and you end up staying until the set ends. But not everything hit the same way. Blades, which was the ice show in Studio B, fell flat. And the familiar mix of skating tricks and colorful staging you'll see on the ice shows on other Royal Caribbean ships, but it never built momentum. The crowd seemed politely entertained. What I mean by that is instead of there being genuine excitement at key moments, instead it was more like a polite golf clap. But I'll say I know that that's unusual for Royal Caribbean, and I know their ice shows on other ships are fantastic. So I'm going to still keep going to those in the future, but this one fell flat. And Mamma Mia, which is the Broadway style production on the Allure, had a talented cast and strong execution, but a 2.5 hour runtime dragged on with an all ABBA soundtrack that just doesn't land for people like me who were born before ABBA's heyday. And I gotta say, it wasn't just me who felt this way. I talked to a number of different people who also said the show felt mismatched with what you would expect on a family friendly cruise line. The new venues they added during the recent amplification were all very popular and executed well. Playmakers, which is the sports bar in the boardwalk, is a fan favorite and a great spot to catch a game with friends. The Mason Jar became one of my favorite evening spots thanks to excellent country music and the best drink menu on the ship. And the pesky parrot that first appeared on the Utopia of the Seas and took the place of the Champagne Bar on the Allure was a popular spot in the evenings with its Caribbean themed menu featuring a variety of tropical cocktails and frozen drinks. Live music across the ship was a consistent win. Whether it was piano at the Schooner Bar or guitar at Bow and Stern or the country sets in the Mason Jar, the talent level on board was excellent. Royal Caribbean knows how to build a ship around music, and the Allure still behaves like a ship designed with that philosophy at its core. Now, for those who enjoy a nightclub, your options are pretty limited. There's Blaze, which is the actual nightclub on deck 4, but it stayed quiet every night I went, and even when Studio B converted into a club, it never drew the kind of crowd you expect on a ship as big as the Allure. But even without the big clubs or a consistent show schedule that hits the iconic levels you see on some of their newest ships, they were a clear reminder of something very important. When it comes to entertainment at sea, Royal Caribbean is the industry leader, and it's really not even close. No one else combines aqua shows, ice shows, Broadway shows, live music, and venue variety with this level of ambition, even on a ship that's been sailing for more than 15 years. And by the end of the week, the message was obvious. When the Allure leans into what Royal Caribbean does best, it can still compete with ships more than a decade younger. The productions may be uneven, but the entertainment DNA is unmistakable, and it's still the strongest in the industry. Service on the Allure of the Seas was consistently strong all week. The crew carried themselves with warmth and confidence, and outside of a few operational hiccups mostly tied to dining, I never felt anyone was unfriendly or disengaged. And for a ship carrying more than 6,000 passengers, that alone is impressive. It also helped that the ship never really felt full, which was a welcome contrast after disembarking the brand new Disney Destiny right before, where the crowds never seemed to let up. The atmosphere, however, was less predictable, partially due to the number of Pinnacles on board. Now, if you're not familiar with Pinnacles, they're Royal Caribbean's top tier loyalty members, and they're guests who have sailed enough nights to get themselves a shiny gold name badge, and their presence was impossible to ignore, especially in the suite areas that they can access regardless of what type of cabin they may have booked. They filled the suite lounge, crowded the suite sun deck, and arrived at Coastal Kitchen a full 30 minutes early to secure every single window seat 30 minutes before dinner even began. They know the system inside and out and position themselves for the best seats at restaurants, at the shows, and anywhere else they believe their status gives them an edge. For many of them, that badge isn't just a name tag, it's their entire identity. But it wasn't just the Pinnacles shaping the vibe. The Allure seemed to have a rowdier crowd than what we've seen on the newer Oasis class and Icon class ships. Older Oasis class ships attract more budget conscious cruisers and at times a more party focused crowd, and it showed in some ways with people pushing into elevators before letting others off, cutting ahead at bars, and in general creating an every person for themselves kind of buzz that I rarely see on Royal's newer ships. It wasn't constant, but it was most definitely noticeable. Through all of it, though, the crew remained steady. Bars were well staffed, service stayed quick, and even at peak times, venues didn't buckle under the crowd, which is a testament to how well the Allure's layout still distributes people more than 15 years after launching. The team on board made the sailing feel manageable in a way that some newer, more high-tech ships struggle to replicate. By the end of the week, the atmosphere felt like classic Royal Caribbean. It was loud, lively, and occasionally chaotic, but paired with service that consistently outperformed the ship's age. Guest behavior was hit or miss, but the crew carried the experience with a level of pride that made the Allure feel more polished than you'd expect from a ship launched in 2010. By the end of the week, I had a pretty good sense of what this ship gets right, where it shows its age, and what I'll do differently the next time I sail on an older Oasis class ship. The first thing on that list is the chef's table. I will skip it entirely. It was expensive, ran long enough to make me miss a show, and it just didn't deliver the experience you expect for the price. If I'm looking for a special meal on this ship, 150 Central Park is the place to go. Mamma Mia also won't be on my schedule again. The performers were talented, but the show was long, the pacing dragged, and it didn't match the energy or demographic of this sailing. The reality is there's just better ways to spend 2.5 hours on board. And for quick meals, I'm heading straight to Park Cafe, as it's a great option for a fast, easy lunch without the crowds you'll find in the buffet. And on a similar note, I'll be doing the Mason Jar Brunch at least twice because it's just that good. It was the standout midday option on this cruise and easily worth a repeat. And if I'm in a suite again, I'll definitely change how I approach Coastal Kitchen. If I want a table with an ocean view, I'll plan to show up at least 45 minutes early, or more likely, I'll just plan to eat a later dinner once the Pinnacles have moved on to their next target. Now, looking back at the week, this cruise reminded me that simply because a ship is older doesn't necessarily mean they provide a lesser experience. They just need to be approached differently. Go on with the right mindset. Know that it's not going to be brand new. Things aren't going to be perfect, but you know what? No cruise is ever perfect, even if it is a brand new ship. We rarely sail the same ship twice because there's just always new ships to explore and experiences to compare. But if I was looking for a budget friendly option on a true megaship, I wouldn't hesitate to book the Allure again. It delivers big ship experience. It's better than it has any right to be at more than 15 years old. And that brings me to my next video, because this cruise got me thinking about the ships I'd sail again tomorrow and which I wouldn't book again even if they were free. So don't stop here, come hang out with me in that one next, where I break down what separates the truly great ships from the ones that you can skip. If you're ready, I am. Let's go.